Good evening. Welcome to the Select Board meeting of Tuesday, August 27th, 2024. We'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Andrea.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under open forum, I've got four things on the agenda. First, congratulations to new Captain Darren Lanier, Lieutenant Benjamin Simmons, and Acting Lieutenant Michael Hanley McCarthy. The promotional ceremony was just about an hour ago at the fire station. Kristen and I went down for that. It was great to see families and the department turn out to recognize these new leaders. It's always fun to watch wives and sons, and in one case, father, pin the new badges on their firefighter paramedics. So congratulations to those three firefighters. Secondly,
here we go.
Public service announcement: Town Hall will be closing at noon on August 30th. That's Friday. It will be open at 8:30 on September 3rd, which is Tuesday.
8.
Sorry, 8th. No, 3rd. Oh, 8 o'clock, I'm sorry. 8 o'clock on September 3rd in observance of Labor Day. Also, the Economic Development Committee survey for Westford businesses is open. Please participate, give us your thoughts, and help us guide the future. And then finally, on the agenda at least, the Select Board is seeking 2 residents at large to serve on the Robinson School Building Committee. The details are online. Just froze. Look it up. You can fill out the activity form. We'll be making appointments on our September 27th meeting. It's the second meeting of September that we'll be having that decision here. So you got some time, but I believe it's a popular spot, so feel free to get in there early. With that, any other?
I think it's September 24th.
Thank you.
Just looking at my calendar.
I'm trying to do the math from the Labor Day.
Yeah.
So with that, any announcements from the board? Anything from the audience? I'm guessing, Megan, that means you.
Megan O'Connell, 44 South Chelmsford Road. I want to touch upon 2 subjects today. One, the Tri-Board Efficiencies meeting. I would just urge the Select Board to accelerate the pace of that. Now, there has been some progress, but during the meeting last week, some residents expressed frustration at the slow pace of it. So I would urge acceleration of that and to explore other options that will cut costs without shifting costs to the residents. The central fueling is a great idea that's saving money without cutting services, but things like pay-as-you-throw and other things that are just shifting costs to the residents probably won't be received as well. Anyway, just a thought. And I would also suggest that the town seriously consider looking into in-house busing, which I was the resident that spoke with Dr. Chu about that several weeks ago. Could save $600,000 a year, which is not chump change. The second thing I wanted to touch upon was the Citizen Activity Forum, which you all know I brought up several months ago, and Jeff had a great presentation a month or so ago about that. 2 things. One, Jeff's memo in today's packet is a great example of what it could be going forward. For the economic development appointment, it goes through 12 applicants over the last 2 years and analyzes each one and comes to a recommendation. So it's a great model moving forward. So I would suggest, again, that the Select Board look into something like that. Related to that, one of the recent meetings, I think, Andrea, I may be wrong, but you may have made a comment about not knowing how many CAFs that we receive. So I actually did a little research into that with the help of Laurie and a Freedom of Information request, and looked at every CAF that the town received from January 1st, 2023 until about 2 weeks ago. Turns out it's about 140, well, exactly 140. And there's a few interesting things in there when you look at it. One, I think at the last meeting, there were 2 appointments made to the Permanent Town Building Committee. There's been 4 people that submitted CAFs for that over that time frame. There's still 1 open seat, and I know that those other 2 people have never heard anything from anyone in the town about that. There's also, looking through the current open positions in all the boards and committees, there are 17 boards and committees that have current openings for which at least 1, and in some cases many, CAFs have been received. So again, I just want to bring that to the board's attention, that there are people, and I know there are some people that are submitting things and not hearing anything back. But again, the comment was made a few weeks ago that you didn't know how many CAFs were received, so there's the answer, 140 since January 1st last year.
Well, I'll just make one observation, and I'll defer to Andrea, but we serve on Affordable Housing Committee, Andrew and I, and we actually have a person delegated to respond to CAFs, and he is religious about that. I think of the past 4 or 5 forms we've submitted, 0 have shown up at a meeting in spite of outreach. So, no, I don't speak of numbers, but there is this sort of, I would never have expected it, but there are people who apply for positions, and then when we do admit the outreach, they don't respond. So, I don't know why, but that actually is happening in one committee which I serve. But
I was going to say the same
Okay.
thing, but also I just had a quick, of the 140 applications, are those 140 separate ones, or are there any duplicates in there? Did you?
That includes a few duplicates, actually.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes, it does.
Chris?
So thank you so much for the comments and the feedback on that issue. Totally hear you. I just want to give you my perspective because I have chaired and I actually continue to chair Park and Rec, but I was the chair of the Pedestrian Safety Committee, and to Scott and Andrea's comments. It is surprising how often we do get a CAF and then you reach out to that person and then you never hear back. Or they check off 4 or 5 committees and then they're like, well, no, maybe I don't want the committee that you're chairing. I'm going to go somewhere else. So we have to be careful with throwing out a big number like that and making sure that we really are doing the right thing, which, as you pointed out, I think we're getting to. It's going to take some time, and I think we need to continue to work on it. I think my one question would be, you brought up there is still an open spot on the Permanent Town Building Committee. Is that correct?
We're researching if there's 1 alternate or 2 alternates. I do not know if
So
that's...
we're looking into that. So we're addressing that particular concern.
But I can say that those other 2 applicants have never heard anything. So it does happen.
Oh, it does. I mean,
Right, yeah.
that I do know, that there are some folks, because it happened in one of the committees that I do serve on, that the applicant, it just slipped through the cracks, to be perfectly honest, and they never heard back. And when we found out, we reached out to that individual, but you are right, that happens.
Yeah, it could be, but I know there are people in town that are wondering what's going on, so I guess I just wanted to present the numbers to the select board
Yeah.
on record so that people can
Thank
see
you.
what it is.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, do you want to say something?
I'm sorry. We're having technical issues with the Zoom. People can't hear or see us at home, so we're gonna stop the Zoom and restart it. So I apologize, but we're just gonna need
Probably
to
should
take
do it now
a
rather than
break.
later.
So Mike, do you want to end for all, and then we'll restart it? You will, if you're logged on, you'll likely have to go back to your Gmail and log back on. I apologize.
Ask Andrea. Can you do it?
No.
First tab?
This up here?
Yeah, the Gmail tab.
What's the meeting ID?
Going to come over a little bit?
No, so if you just go back to the
Yeah.
Gmail.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
No, that's the reminder. The Zoom.
That's what you want. No, you
Oh,
want
the
you want that
reminder.
one,
Oh,
and the
right,
link
okay.
is in that.
Oh,
Yep.
here we go. Click to, okay, next time I'm going to remember, okay?
Yep.
Okay, here we go.
Let's see if it works.
And then mute it.
Right.
Recording in progress.
So let us just test this. We have someone on the phone that we're testing. So the owl is restarting. This is a test for people at home. If you can hear us,
Raise your hand.
raise your hand right in the chat. I have Patty here. She said she's on, but she has a frozen picture and no sound.
Even internally, I don't have a picture.
Yeah, I don't have a picture either.
So you can't see the owl on your screen.
It's just black.
I have the owl on my screen, but it is frozen.
We should have had Mike Wells here tonight instead of...
So I'm gonna unplug and replug in the owl.
Trade.
Yeah, I'm sure you gladly would. It's just- It works 9 times out of 10, right? When in doubt, reboot.
Yep.
Just for the record, this doesn't count against my time for the agenda, okay?
Absolutely. We'll give you a...
Yep.
Can people at home hear us or see us? Okay, we can be heard. I think the camera, is the camera on, Mike?
There, no cam.
So the camera needs to be checked. All right, can you see us at home?
Ah, it should be. able
See you
to.
here.
We can see it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, see and hear. Okay, so Andrea and John, you have your cameras on, so if you want to turn them off, you can turn them off. If you want to keep them on, people at home will see you. I don't care. And Scott, I think we can resume. I
Okay.
apologize. I think John had a comment
Yep.
when we had stopped.
Well, I just attended the Permanent Town Building Committee meeting the other night, and they appointed one permanent member and one alternate.
Right.
So I assume, based on that they're full.
Well, what
They need
I
another alternate.
what I don't know is whether we are allocated 1 or 2 alternates, so that's
Yeah,
the
okay,
question.
that's it.
So
Okay.
we were looking at that before meeting started and having technical issues, so.
Okay.
Anything else under open forum? So thank you, Megan. We're working our way through that. So I guess takes us to the 705 item, which is our consent agenda. A special license for a wine and wild woman of Westford. Applicant is Linda Green of the Westford Museum. It is August 30th from 7:30 to 9 p.m. at the Westford Museum on 2 Boston Road. Is there a motion to approve, subject to public safety comments?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So just so you know, Tom is not here tonight. He's not remote. He's not here. So we'll be voting as we normally do without roll call. So next up is an update from Nobis on the 12 West Main Street EPA cleanup. I believe we got Jeffrey Brunel online. Or no, he's here. Even better. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you.
Is it Jeffrey or Jeff?
Either.
Okay.
Jeff.
Okay.
My only Jeffrey when I'm in trouble.
Okay.
Your mother calls you Jeffrey.
So thanks. Welcome. If you want to just fill us in who you are and what you've been doing, and then where we stand.
Yep. My name is Jeff Brunel. I'm the Director of Project Development at Nobis Group. We are an engineering consulting firm out of Lowell, Mass. And we recently applied and was awarded the cleanup grant to work on the 12 North Main Street site, the former Westford anodizing mill over on North Main.
Mike is just pulling up your
Okay,
presentation. So
perfect.
sorry, we just went, as you saw, we went through some technical
Sure,
difficulties.
yeah.
So thanks for your patience.
I'm sort of stepping on my first couple slides, but we partnered with GES, who is a local Westford firm that we've done many joint EPA projects together, whether it was site assessment work or cleanup work. And we also have a remediation contractor who's worked on AOC2. Well, here's the slide now. And it's both of our firms sort of rolled in together. But we are a multidisciplinary engineering firm, like I said, out of Lowell, with an office also here in Westford. To move forward on the site background, the site was originally developed as a grist mill, so they did some grain processing. Then it was evolved into a woolen mill where they actually processed wool. Then they started to manufacture machines that would help to process the wool. And after major fire, Westford Anodizing purchased the property to do some metal work over there. So over the history of the site, historical electroplating operations resulted in some soil contamination that's local to the site. Part of it is lead, zinc, and cyanide. It also impacted portions of the groundwater and the Stony Brook sediments. But our focus in particular is what's called the Area of Concern 4, which is where the former incinerator is located and the surface soil that's immediately surrounding that area. You can go to the next slide, please. This is just a depiction of the overall mill property. If you look to the right side of the map here, you can see where AOC4 is highlighted with the red arrow. That's our primary focus for the remedial effort. Again, with the incinerator, it's a small, tiny brick incinerator, about 300 square feet, that had contributed to surface soil contamination through operation and ash, things like that. Next slide, please. This is just a close-up of the AOC4. It shows some of the sampling and investigation activities done by others in the past, which was the basis for the grant and the foundation for the remedial action out there. Next slide. So again, site investigation was previously conducted by prior consultants. This remediation is funded by the town brownfield cleanup grant, which you guys applied and got through EPA. So congratulations on that. It's great to be selected for something like that. And the remediation focuses on the demolition of that incinerator structure and the abatement of the surface soil. So one of the key words up there is imminent hazard. There were levels of surface soil contamination that required some segregation to keep it isolated from the public. There's a fence that's around there, and that's the key to getting us out there to remediate that to unrestricted use. So our overall goal is to clean it up to a level where you could do whatever you want with that site out there. Next slide, please. So activity so far, we've been dealing with sort of the contract kickoff. All of our project planning has been completed. We've procured and solidified our project team through our subcontractors, so that includes drillers and labs and the excavators and all those people that will come in and help us with the soil removal action. We've completed our health and safety plans, that quality assurance project plan there, called the QAP for short. That's something that is EPA mandated, that you submit your sampling and remediation plan for their approval. And we've already submitted that and got that back from EPA. We have the green light to get going on that. And then there's also Mass DEP coordination. So you see an acronym MCP up there. That's the Massachusetts Contingency Plan. That's the environmental regulations that DEP has promulgated for these types of cleanups. And we have that remedial implementation plan that we'll submit to DEP when we're ready to break ground with the remedial action. Another thing was we've had the town kickoff meeting here. Some additional site work that we've done some clearing and grubbing and installed erosion controls. So as you saw from the map, this site is right on the brook, on Stony Brook. So we are working within the order of conditions with the Concom. They came out and saw our erosion controls that were installed. they gave us approval to move forward, and we're sensitive to the areas there that are wetlands in the Stony Brook area. We completed the hazardous building materials survey of the incinerator, so that included asbestos, lead paint, PCB evaluation surveys and sampling to make sure that anything that could be regulated is removed from the, would be abated from the building before they do any demo work out there. And then we're also in the process of conducting a land survey to identify the parcel boundaries out of the property. Next slide, please. So there's the little incinerator you can see in the picture there, in the fenced area that sort of secures it. Great news, there's no hazardous or regulated materials that we found in our survey, so no asbestos detected, no lead-based paint identified, and there was nothing to sample for PCBs. So great. No abatement needed before demo. So the next steps, we're continuing to do our site investigation that's required for the preparation for the remedial action. We're ready to move forward with the incinerator demolition. And based on any new soil data we might get that's not part of the historical record, we might update the conceptual site model. And then after that, we're ready to move some soil. That's it for me. Any questions?
Thanks. Mostly good news. Any questions? Chris?
Yeah, so it said Conscom's reviewed your erosion control. Just what are you exactly going to do there? Because I assume, you know, once you start disturbing that soil, rain, is it washing into the brook? How are you stopping that from happening?
Yep, so they have silt fence installed, straw wattles, things like that, that keep the flow from the site from moving around. And part of the control is really during the abatement or the remedial actions out there to make sure that whatever we're doing isn't contributing to stormwater runoff or contaminant migration or anything like that. So it's typical stormwater control for a construction site that makes sure that if we had a heavy rain event or something like that, nothing's going to migrate to the brook or outside of the area concern. We have other provisions that we've established with that QAP where there's dust control to make sure there's no nuisance dust. There's contaminant monitoring to make sure that the levels that we're seeing are not migrating off-site. We have provisions for stockpiling that includes more stormwater barriers, poly sheeting, both for storage on top of and cover to make sure that we're not going to have any erosion of any soil that we're moving. So it's typical for a construction site, but it's also part of that QAP that we talked about, and the provisions were submitted to EPA. And then the order of conditions was established by the town Concom, and we are adhering to those in order to work in the vicinity of Stony Brook as well.
Thank
So
you.
we're abiding by your rules as well.
That's good to hear.
So when you're done, this piece of the site is basically buildable? It's
That's the goal. As we continue to move forward, you know, some of these sites are dynamic. Sometimes you find things that might not have been characterized before. Sometimes there's an audible that you might have to run, but the intent is to address this one particular area of concern. So again, asking if the site is buildable, this portion is the focus of the remediation, where there's other portions of the property that are identified as an MCP site, or there's actually some other grants that you guys have won.
I understand that, yeah.
Yeah.
But this piece of it will be considered clean.
Yes.
Jeff can also add to that.
So I will say that our conservation resource planner has been out to the site a number of times to inspect and check the erosion controls. And then I'd also like to state on behalf of both my building commissioner and the conservation resource planner, we don't like to use the word buildable necessarily where the site is in proximity to the stream and there's a whole host of other local permitting requirements. So we like to say, I guess, unrestricted in this case from the uses that might be there due to the environmental conditions, so.
Fair enough. I guess I was self-chastised. Thank you.
Our goal is to make it so you have many options to do whatever the town.
That's even better. That's good.
John?
Your scope is just the AOC 4?
Yes, sir.
And our goal is to have this entire site usable to some degree, and this only gets us part way. You don't have anything to do with any of the other areas of the facility?
I can help answer that. So we
Okay.
put out a request for proposals and and for area of concern 4 only. That was what was covered under the EPA grant for $500,000. Right now, we have a invitation for bid out for area of concern 2, a portion of that. So that is currently out there with using the mass development brownfield grant funds for $250,000. We feel that we're going to have to go even further with other funds, whether they be grant funds or some other funds, for further cleanup. So in the past, this was done very incrementally. It's very expensive to do brownfield cleanup. As you can see, this area of concern number 4 is very small, and it's going to cost $500,000 to just do that area. So I'm working with Jeff Morissette and his team to develop, a long-term plan of how to get this property cleaned up in order to do whatever the town wants to move forward with it in the future, which in the past, they were trying to dispose of it, but it wasn't successful because of these contaminants on the property.
So we're just getting started.
We're moving forward. I think a little bit of another area was cleaned up a few years ago, so this is just the next step in the process, but it is going to be a very slow and incremental process.
Thank you, Jeff.
You've tested around the incinerator. Have you actually tested inside the incinerator too? So that, when it comes down, we're not going to get a surprise?
So the testing that we've done so far under this contract is just for the hazardous building materials of the incinerator itself. We're in the process of developing the sampling plan. That's what we have approved under that QAP.
Okay.
We just haven't implemented the sampling yet. So as part of the process, you need to get updated data, you need to characterize your waste within a certain amount of times for a certain amount of time for a receiving facility to accept that data as valid. So we're using the historical data that was collected by others, that was the basis of the grant, as the stepping stone to develop our investigation, just to check the boxes and get the current updated data so we can move forward with the remedial action as planned in the grant.
Chris?
So you mentioned the possibility of having to call out an audible. I like that when you termed that. But if that does happen, is there money in the budget to cover that? Do you have like a contingency as part of the plan that would allow for you to do something if something was found to try to, I don't know, remediate it to some degree?
Yeah, so we sort of skipped over the first slide fairly quickly, but Novus and GES and SES has been doing this for a long time, and our partnership has been on these EPA brownfield cleanups for a myriad of sites that are from something very small to something very large. So we have a lot of experience with getting the most bang for your buck, so to say. So we're always moving the project forward. We're always making it efficient and economical to do whatever we can within the funds that are there. So the audible, I sometimes I joke and say if I could see underground like X-ray vision, I'd be the richest man in the universe, right? So you just never know what you're going to find out there, and I don't want to say that we're expecting anything bad to happen, but there's always the contingency that things don't go purely as planned, and we've done this before, and we can work our way around it.
So what I'm thinking of, you start the process, you find, oh, there's something there, and do you have enough money to either remove it, remediate it completely, or at least cap it so that it doesn't become a further contaminant to the surrounding area until we find some other funds to pay for the remediation of whatever was found?
Sure. So, I mean, the site has been stable for a long time. It's sort of managed itself being the way that it is.
You're going to destabilize it, right, by taking away the soil and this incinerator.
Right.
So,
yes. So if we did find something that we had to adjust to, it would be in the very beginning stage when we do this additional sampling out there,
okay.
And then we would coordinate with the town to make sure that we have a viable option within the funds that we have already to make sure that you get something out of there, where we're not going to leave you with a hole in the ground that's not filled in, or something that's washing into the brook or whatever.
So we can hold you to that.
Yes. I mean, there's best case scenario and worst case scenario, and I can firmly say that we'll be somewhere in between that,
Clearly.
and get you some significant value for your money.
Yeah.
Just a follow-up question to just what you said, which is that you'll know early on when you're doing this sampling. So when do you expect to do the next phase of sampling that you might know?
Sure. So the next phase is going to commence next month. So we're already at the end of the
Okay.
month here. And our plans are to start that sampling. We're already starting to establish our location at the AOC. We have a sampling grid that we've been working on to know where our locations are when we collect our samples and drive the excavation and the remediation forward. And that's scheduled to commence next month. So it's still a little bit of a juggling act because we have multiple contractors that we're using between coordination with the lab and the drillers who help us get our samples and install monitoring wells for groundwater monitoring, the excavation company and the hauling and the receiving facilities. All these have to sort of fall into place where I wouldn't say the stars have to align, but there's some coordination to make it work.
I'm just trying to figure out a timeline of if there's something bad out there, when we're going to know about it, so we can, if we have to plan or figure out what we're going to do or how we're going to respond.
Sure.
I'm just thinking of timing-wise for the town, like when you might know that.
Yeah, so I think a good time frame would be that next month we have the data collected, and then for a month or so for analysis and validation and evaluation. So within 2 months for sure, we would have the usable data and the plan to move forward with the remediation. Sometimes sooner. It is a federal grant, and there's sort of procedures that you have to go through to make sure that everything is within the boundaries of the grant regulations. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer than you might expect from a commercial job or something, but it's part of the process.
Fair to say by the end of the year?
For sure, we'll have we will be the excavation and everything should be completed by the end of the year.
Anybody else? Anybody else in the audience?
I do have one online.
There are questions online.
So this is from Andy Bergamini. Is there a project plan that the taxpayers can access with the key milestones and measurables? If not, why not? So I'm assuming that he's asking for this particular project, which is just AOC 4. He's asking that the question's for Nobis, but I just want to caveat that we did receive an initial project plan and timeline from Nobis when we had the kickoff meeting. There may be some changes based upon what you found. Jeff Morissette and I talked earlier this week about revamping the 12 North Main webpage because that hasn't been updated in quite some time. So adding this presentation that you saw this evening, we can certainly add that key milestone and measurements information as well. And Jeff, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I did have a conversation with Mr. Bergamini earlier today, and I think I shared some of that with you. I think from an outsider's perspective, I think he finds it would be helpful if, we've talked about 4 different areas of concern. I think it would be helpful in a concise way to just say, these are the different areas, here's what's happened on these are the plans for each of these, and this is the time frame for when we may progress, through that cleanup process and what is left in an order, just so someone on the outside can kind of follow and piece together what's going on. And I think that's a good suggestion. So,
Is that something we would do on a quarterly basis or annually, just to provide that type of written update?
well, I suppose we might be able to prepare sort of that high level now, and then upon completion of Area Concern 4, we would update it. I'm not sure we would update it every quarter. It's based upon, changes
Progress
or
of
new
work.
information, so.
And more funding as,
Well, that could be part of the thing, I think what we're gonna find is, Area of Concern 4 hopefully will be addressed. We know there's been activity at Area of Concern 3. I don't think that's fully resolved yet. Area of Concern 2 depends on the results for the invitation to bids and what comes out of that process. But that still leaves a chunk of the site where the building proper is. And so, but I think we can, in simple terms, lay that out in sort of the planned approach to get there. So I think that's a good ask of the community. So I think we should do that.
Just to talk about the funding a little bit too, is that once you get these things rolling, then you have the momentum, and it's more on your resume to go back to EPA or Mass Development or DEP or whomever to say, hey, look at the progress we're making, look at the success that we've had, and these tend to lead to more opportunities to apply for grants and be awarded grants. So it's great that you have some investigation work that's done already. It's great that some of the areas already been addressed. It's great that you won this grant to address AOC 4. You guys are it feels like a slow process, but you're gaining some momentum, and it's really benefiting the town moving this forward.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next, we have a Department of Energy presentation on and Q&A on the municipal opt-in specialized stretch energy code. Say that 10 times fast. And I believe we've got Dylan Patel online, or is he here?
He's here.
Oh, you're, okay, great, even better.
All right.
And Michael Rossi as well. So, yeah, you can go. I will just briefly introduce them, and Mike, if I forget anything, please fill me in. So, back in December, January time period, the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee had requested of your board that you investigate moving forward with adopting the opt-in specialized stretch code. The town of Westford already has the stretch code implemented. You are a green community, so that was part of the green community program. In working with some of the staff, including Mr. Morissette and his team, and the building inspector, we provided a memorandum to the board that we would like more time to investigate and review this, and we were not ready to go forward at the March town meeting, but you had requested this to be further moved forward to the October town meeting. So at this point in time, you do have a placeholder on your agenda and the warrant for the October town meeting. This really starts the kickoff process. Actually, it doesn't start. It continues the process for the board to learn more about the opt-in stretch code and the specialized code, excuse me. I'm going to mince my words related to that. Additionally, we do have an event planned on September 12th that we're inviting any member of the community that wishes to participate and members of the building community to participate, where a similar presentation will be given, but it'll be more detailed and veered towards the building community. And we're asking currently for their feedback and questions related to that. And then we'll be back to your board on September 24th to see if you still wish to put this on the warrant for the October special town meeting. Did I forget anything, Mike?
No, I think that covers it.
All right. So we will,
Just
The meeting on the 12th will be where?
Yeah.
so at Millennium and via Zoom, excuse me. And we're starting to
what
put
time?
7 p.m. We're starting to put flyers out this week, so we'll make sure to share that with the public and the board.
I would add also that we do have a website set up on the town manager's website, and if anybody has any questions, they could submit them in advance of the session so that we can get answers to those as well.
So with that, we'll let Dylan and his team start their presentation. If you don't mind introducing yourself and then running through your slides.
Thank you, Kristen and Mike. My name is Dylan Patel. I am the Northeast Regional Coordinator for the Green Communities Division at the Department of Energy Resources.
And I'm Michael Rossi. I'm an energy code specialist with PSD.
So yeah, as Kristen and Mike were mentioning, we're just going to give a pretty general overview of the specialized code, the opt-in code. We're going to use them interchangeably. They're the same thing. And we're going to just take this at like a 10,000 foot level, just so that we can provide a little bit more of a detailed and more nuanced answers during the Q&A. So the specialized stretch energy code exists on top of a pyramid of 3 existing codes within the state of Massachusetts. So Westford is already an adoptee of the stretch code since it became a green community about 11 years ago. So it has a long history with the existing stretch code, which is pretty much the dominant code in the state of Massachusetts. The specialized code exists as extra amendments, requirements on top of the stretch code, and that's essentially how it exists. It became available in January of 2023, so it's only been in existence for just over 18 months. And in that, frankly, short period of time, we've already had 45 municipalities already adopt it. And Westford is one of 8 to 10 municipalities that are exploring it for either this fall or for the following spring. And so if we go to the map of who has adopted the specialized code, and forgive me, this is actually a fairly dated map. So this has 33, like I mentioned before, there's actually 45. So there are towns including Newburyport, Ashfield, Ashland, that have adopted it in the past few months. But even so, there are quite a few neighbors of Westford that have adopted it quite a while ago. So Carlisle, Acton, and Chelmsford have adopted the specialized stretch energy code. So we do get some concerns from builders and developers about potential extra stringencies that might be required under this specialized code. But I think that gets less and less true as more communities adopt it, and the risk of developers kind of like shopping around, quote unquote, for minimal regulations is diminishing over time. So the specialized stretch energy code is part of one criteria of what the DOER has launched as its Climate Leaders program. This is a new grant program that builds in on our existing Green Communities program. And like I mentioned, Westford has been in this program for just under 11 years now. And it has received about over $1 million in green community funding. Climate Leaders establishes essentially stricter criteria for new enhanced levels of funding. And like I mentioned, specialized stretch code adoption is one of them. And Westford has already met some of the other criteria already. And to give a little bit more detail on what Climate Leaders actually means, so we're still finalizing the funding amounts. However, we are expecting the funds to go towards on-site renewables, such as municipal solar, heat pumps, including ground source heat pumps, and other building decarbonization activities. This kind of builds on the amazing work that this town has done over the past decade in achieving energy savings, in getting several buildings, municipal buildings, on the way towards electrification through its work in energy saving and weatherization. And we hope that we can provide enhanced funding. I can safely say that it is going to be over and above what we usually offer for green communities, which for the town of Westford is limited to $125,000 at this point. And so we can anticipate more funding for these activities. And we are also exploring capacity building funds, such as seed funds for an energy manager and for technical studies as well. So those are kind of the policy implications of the specialized code. I'm going to turn it over to Mike to actually explain what the code actually entails.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Dylan. So a little bit of introductory information about the specialized code. So the specialized stretch code applies only to new buildings. It has no impact on existing or historic homes. It applies to buildings with permit requests after an effective date. So when you adopt and then it's effective, it applies for buildings that are permitted after that date. There's no additional requirements for the specialized code if it's an all-electric home. So if you're building with all-electric space heating equipment, water heating equipment, cooking equipment, and clothes drying equipment, you can, off the bat, not just meet the requirements of the existing code without having to do anything new. It does retain the choice to build with natural gas, though, so you can still use natural gas. There are just additional requirements to meet the code if you do so. So there are some thoughts where it could be cheaper to build and operate an electric house when compared to the base code. And part of that's because you'd be using one piece of equipment, like an air source heat pump or something, for space heating and cooling, as opposed to using two systems like a furnace and a central air conditioner. So instead of paying for the cost of both systems, you're only using one system that can do both. The big thing is forward thinking and future proofing. So it does make new buildings as efficient as possible. And we'll talk about the specific requirements in more detail soon, but a big part of this is consumer protection by saving future homeowners money if they want to convert their house to all electric, if they're using mixed fuel to begin with. The requirements for electric vehicle wiring are the same as they would be under the stretch code, the existing code, with no additional requirements added to that as part of this code. And there are additional funding opportunities that Dylan mentioned with the Climate Leaders Program for those that are part of this or that adopt it. So this gives a little bit of a snapshot of what the requirements are. So as I mentioned, if you are a residential building, if you're going all electric, the requirement is the same as it would be under the stretch code. If you're mixed fuel or passive house, and mixed fuel being defined as any equipment that uses combustion equipment for space heating, water heating, cooking, and clothes drying, and that's like natural gas or propane or something like that, that would meet the requirements of the stretch code, plus have a couple of additional requirements. So electrification ready, which means you have to have like circuit or outlet nearby any current equipment that uses fossil fuels for the future electrification of that equipment. And additionally, there's a requirement to install a 4 kilowatt solar array. So having on-site renewable energy generation to offset some of the energy use that's used as part of being mixed fuel. So
Okay, but what about backup power?
backup power, so if you are using a generator like that, it can still qualify as all electric even when a generator is in use. Great question.
Thanks.
And then there's additional requirements for larger mixed fuel homes. So mixed fuel homes that are over 4,000 square feet, which are typically larger luxury homes. The requirements are to be the same, but the amount of renewable energy has to be enough in order to get to net zero. And that's through 2 different means of how net zero is defined in the code. One as a HERS 0, Home Energy Rating System score of 0, which is a third-party certification system. And there's Passive House, which is another third-party certification system. And the Passive House 0 or HERS 0 are the 2 options there. So when you're getting into some of the multifamily requirements of the code, as I said, the same as on like smaller homes, Passive House, or sorry, for all electric homes, same requirements as it would be under the stretch code. But there are, if it's multifamily over 10,000 square feet, I believe. 12,000 square feet, sorry. There's a requirement for the building to be built to Passive House standards, and there's 2 types of Passive House certification you can build to. There's Passive House Institute, which is an international European standard, as well as Passive House Institute United States, is what it used to be called. Now it's called just VIAS, it's just the acronym. And those certification programs are third party, so you have a rater come in, inspect the features of the home, and build an energy model based on those features. Typically, Passive House design is very, very, very energy efficient, very tight homes, using a lot of insulation and mechanical ventilation system, using best building practices to get to a very low energy use building. So that is a component of this. So if it's a multifamily building over 12,000 square feet and over 4 stories, the requirements under the opt-in code are building to Passive House if it's all electric. And if it's mixed fuel, you also have to build the Passive House, but it's also requiring that electrification ready stuff. So you can still do Passive House under mixed fuel, it's just a little bit harder. And you just have to have that pre-wiring if you're gonna go to that approach. And then for commercial buildings, the requirements are relatively similar, but just on a bigger scale. So for all electric, same requirements as the stretch code. For mixed fuel homes or homes that do build to Passive House, the requirement is that electrification ready there. And then for the other buildings, there's the requirements for electrification and on-site solar when it's feasible. And the requirements for solar is different size requirements than it would be under the residential code. So residential is 4 kilowatt array for under 4,000 square feet, or enough to get to net zero over 4,000. For the commercial standard, it's essentially 1.5 watts per square foot when you take the 3 largest floor areas of the building. And that's the amount of solar that would be required in a commercial project.
I think we discussed that in the next slide.
Yep. Yep. So thanks, Dylan. So this goes into a little bit more detail about it. So as I mentioned, if you're building a new all-electric home, solar is not going to be required. If you're building a new Passive House home that's all electric, solar is not required. If it's a mixed fuel home that's over 4,000 square feet, you have to have enough energy through on-site generation to get to net zero, and that would be 8 kilowatts or higher, depending on the site and specific building provisions there. And if it's under 4,000 square feet, which are where most homes will be built, there's a requirement for a 4 kilowatt solar array. And then the commercial standard, as I said, is 1.5 watts per square feet of the 3 largest floors. And for other residential buildings, like multifamily buildings or things like that don't really fall under the typical residential sections, the requirement's 0.75 watts per square feet. And so note that with the on-site generation, it can be ground mounted or on the roof. As long as it's on-site, you can't use off-site generation. It has to be somewhere on-site. And it's only when there's a suitable solar roof zone of 300 square feet or greater. And that's essentially a zone that's oriented well so that it's going to capture the most solar, and one that isn't shaded for more than 70% of daylight hours annually. So that's what the solar requirements really entail as part of the code.
So essentially, solar is required for mixed fuel buildings, but it might not always be the case that you would have to have solar on your building if your roof were oriented in such a way, or if you had trees surrounding the building. But this is essentially, like I mentioned, the general overview of the specialized energy code. We wanted to keep it brief so that we had enough time for Q&A. A lot of our detailed slides are contained in the supplemental index that we've compiled together, and we can refer to specific slides depending on any questions that are asked.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, questions from the board? John?
In your list for climate leader, we've met, I think, 3 out of the 5 requirements already. But the 2 concern me. You got the ZEV, the first vehicle policy for electrical vehicles. Would you tell me kind of what that policy would look like?
Sure. So Westford has already adopted a fuel-efficient vehicle policy, which requires that its municipal fleet for light-duty vehicles, so anything that's under 8,500 pounds, have to follow EPA fuel efficiency standards. Our fuel efficiency, our zero emissions vehicle first policy kind of builds on top of that. So any light duty vehicle that's owned by the town the purchasing requirements would have to look first into an electric vehicle. If that is not feasible because an electric vehicle is just not available, or if it does not meet the needs of the department, then you can look into plug-in electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. And if that doesn't meet, if those aren't available either, then just the most efficient gasoline vehicle. So it encourages the municipalities to start purchasing electric vehicles for their municipal fleet.
Well, I guess my concern, it goes towards something like the police cruiser fleet, and a lack of charging stations for them, a lack of a plan to even where we're going to have those charging stations, and how you keep a fleet of cars like that running, and we haven't even got the plug-ins for them yet.
Right.
And, so we started out by going to hybrid as a stepping stone to that. Now, would the DOER kind of hold us to trying really hard to get an electrical vehicle, or would they allow us a transition plan so that we have a logical progress toward that, so that what we have is a fleet that can do the job, that's housed the way it needs to be housed, and has a fleet plug-in station just for the police department, for example. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And would you hold us to a stricter standard, or how would you look at that?
So we can we'll take these kinds of situations on a case-by-case basis, but at a general level, police vehicles are exempted from this policy until fiscal 26, so from July of 2025, which is not a lot. I don't know, it's not a long time. Yeah. Considering the market availability of hybrid cruisers and electric cruisers, but even from fiscal 26, if there are no electric cruisers that are available, then we won't provide a blanket exemption, but we'll definitely be a lot easier on those municipalities that can't, if it's not available, then we're not going to hold you to account for it, essentially.
Well, that's disturbing, just the way that statement in the say, if the basis you're judging on is that the vehicle is not available. Well, we have electrical vehicles available, and we backed off of one because they couldn't get it right, but we've gone to the hybrid because we don't really have a plan or any places for them to plug in, say a secure place for our security vehicles to be plugged in. Right now, we've got a few around, and there's no organized place for our police fleet to be charged on a regular basis. Need an operational plan that says that. And so if your judgment is, can we get the vehicles? Yeah, we probably can. Should we? Probably not, until we have something in place that would support them. I mean, would you look at that?
Oh, yes. So there are two things there. So we, DOER and Mass CEC does provide support for fleet electrification studies. The other is that if you don't have the infrastructure in place yet, then you wouldn't be expected to electrify your police vehicles or any other part of your fleet unless you have the infrastructure and the operational wherewithal to do it. In which case, we would just encourage you to either pursue hybrid cruisers, and if that's still not possible, then you can just continue purchasing the most fuel-efficient gasoline police vehicle.
And we're doing hybrids right now.
Yeah. So we do realize that there are a lot of moving parts to this, and you're not expected to electrify your entire fleet in the next year or so. So this is it's going to be a learning process, and we're going to be fairly, I don't want to say lenient, but we're not going to be strict.
Flexible.
Yes.
So, and my understanding, which could be wrong, was that if you got an electric vehicle, you had to retire the old gasoline vehicle. And what we tend to do is, if we get a new frontline police cruiser, the last one becomes available to detectives or some other use which is less intensive on the vehicle. So we have hand-me-downs. So I guess I want to be sure that the understanding was if we were to get a new EV, yes, there may be a trade-in, but it may not be the vehicle that is being replacing. It may be something older in the fleet. I guess I was curious how that works.
So our recycling policy is the same as it was with the existing fuel-efficient vehicle policy. So if you do get a new vehicle to replace an existing one, and then that existing one gets transferred, and you've kind of like started this line, we'll allow that as long as the kind of hand-me-down replaces a less efficient vehicle.
It should probably would, okay. Any more questions? Chris, I think you
Still got some more questions.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Okay, the code is either in or out. You're either in or you're out.
Yeah, there's no in between.
There's no in between, okay. Now, this thing provides for updates every 5 years where you change the criteria or you can change the code every 5 years. So if we sign on for this, then the changes you make 5 years from now, in the next 5 years, we'd be liable for doing that. We would be required to comply with that. And so how would you characterize those types of changes? I mean, would you be changing something to do with older houses or existing houses or anything like that nature?
Yeah, I can speak to that.
Sure.
So typically the model, so a lot of times the codes are based on this national model code that's developed, and that's developed and updated every 3 years. So that's the International Energy Conservation Code. On the residential side, there's also a commercial standard, ASHRAE 90.1, that's also developed on 3-year cycles. So right now there's the IECC 2024 and the ASHRAE 90.1 2022. So it's every 3 years from those that get updated. Typically, energy codes get updated to reflect, sort of be an overlay of what's in that national model code. So typically, the requirements will sort of fit in line a little bit with what's in the new code. So if there are any changes to the model codes, typically states will go use that as an overlay and then just like amend the code to reflect that and just sort of keep up to date with new technologies and things like that that come about.
Or do you expect that change to be addressing something like you change the policy for houses that are less than 4,000 square feet? Or would that stay pretty much the same? The only thing would be some of the insulation requirements or something technical like that? What would you?
So I don't think there's any specific guarantees on what would stay in and stay out after that period. So, but it's a matter of this code is really fresh and new, so it was only started in 2023. We actually are starting to see some updates to it now, and some of those updates that they're making are more like clarifications and providing new opportunities for additional credit. So if you're worried about meeting stringency of some of these requirements, you can do a new feature, which is embodied carbon, which is looking at the global warming potential of insulating materials. That'll help offset some of the other requirements of the code. So that is something that DOER is looking at, and there is a public comment period on those potential updates. So anytime there is an update, they will go up for public hearing first. We'll collect community feedback, get some information about that, and then the regulations will be published based on that feedback that's provided
So we
there.
would be signing up for something that's really a little bit unknown, but you expect it to be somewhat reasonable.
Which, to be fair, you have done already with the stretch code.
Right, exactly.
Like I've mentioned before, Westford has been party to the stretch code for well over a decade now. And this is, like you said, it's an in or out situation. So it goes to town vote to go in. I as DOER and what the other regional coordinators say is that if this is not for you in the next few years, you can always take it to town meeting to get out. And yeah, we're pretty frank about that.
Chris, you have your hand up?
Yeah, just if you could briefly touch upon what the specialized versus stretch code implications are for municipal buildings. You have a slide in your deck that we got. I don't know if we didn't really touch upon it, but it might be helpful just to talk about that.
Sure. Mike, do you want to take us to slide 20? Is that, keep going. I think it's the one after this one. Okay, so, thank you. So municipal buildings follow the commercial stretch code, which follows what's known as TEDI, thermal energy demand intensity.
Correct, yep.
Got it. And essentially it has to follow requirements that limit heating and cooling demand, usually through insulation, airtightness, and full envelope sealing. What it would mean for municipal buildings going forward is that if it's an all-electric municipal building, then it's the same. If it's a mixed-fuel municipal building, then you need to have solar on the rooftop or just go passive house. But in either of those cases, you still have to have pre-wiring for those combustion equipment. Did I miss anything, Mike?
Nope, yeah, I believe that's it. And just note that everything noted in this slide are different compliance pathways that are applicable to different types of commercial buildings. So municipal buildings, as long as it's under 20,000 square feet, will meet some requirements. If it's over 20,000 square feet, there might be another pathway it falls into. There's targeted performance, relative performance, and then prescriptive, which is what's under 20,000 square feet that we're most likely dealing with. Along with two performance-based options, which are Passive House and that HERS, Home Energy Rating Index or Energy Rating Index. And so essentially buildings under 20,000 square feet, which I'm imagining are probably most of these falling under that, would just have the requirements that Dylan mentioned there. Mm-hmm. And any building of any size can also use that Passive House path as an alternative. So any commercial path can use that, but then the other ones are based on different triggers of targets of when it would apply. So other commercial over 20,000 square feet, if it has a high ventilation rate, it might go under one pathway. If it's a low ventilation rate, it might have to fall under another one. So it's sort of just how you categorize what type of commercial buildings falls where. But in most cases, municipal buildings under 20,000 square feet will have to meet the prescriptive requirements of the code, which are essentially everything that's laid out in the Massachusetts Building and Energy Stretch Code.
So the specific example I had in mind is if we as a town adopt this and then we go forward to say build a new fire station, is that something that is able to be built in this passive house format? Can we do that even though it's got these large doors that open all the time and things of that nature? Or that is something like that exempted?
So I believe you can build a passive house fire station.
Any kind of building can technically be built to passive house standards. I just don't have any examples of public safety buildings that have.
Yeah, because I know it's something where a big part of that, even though it's open to the outside, a lot of the time, passive house is big at creating like a thermal boundary, which is essentially like the box that you put the building in, and usually that garage space where you can find the engines and stuff is outside of that. So that's typically how it would be structured. So, but a building like that could be passive house if you wanted to go that route, or you could follow just the requirements of the energy code, as long as it's under that 20,000 square feet value. Yes.
Wait, hold on. Hang on a minute.
So I guess you're answering this question, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to, Sue Thomas, 7 Old Homestead. I believe Natick has built an all-electric fire station that would meet this code. So there are examples out there, and it'd be worth talking to them and visiting them. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
So, okay, Andrea?
So I have some more practical questions, okay?
Are you saying our questions are practical? No, just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yours are practical. Mine are sort of impact on town and town staff,
sure.
okay? So I guess questions for you folks, and I don't expect you guys to be able to answer them tonight, but particularly Jeff is the Assistant Town Manager of Land Use, Economic Development, whatever your title is.
Goes off into the sunset.
Right. But, you know, if the town should decide to adopt these, you know, what is the impact upon the town, the departments, the workload, and I think, you know, you should have an understanding about that. I'd also, I mean, I see that, you know, Chelmsford, Carlisle, Bedford, Acton, Concord, Maynard, and Stowe have all adopted the specialized code, and I'd be interested to hear, you know, what their experience has been. You know, have they gotten a lot? Has it been embraced? Has there been pushback from the community and the developers? I would just be sort of interested to hear what our colleagues have experienced. And then the other thing for you guys, and also for the town, if we decide at our September 24th meeting to put this on the warrant, there's got to be a whole lot of education.
Mm-hmm.
And our town meeting is October 17th? 21st. I was close.
Yep.
October 21st. I mean, that's a month to get a lot of information out there. And so I don't know who that would fall to. I'm certainly concerned about getting information out there. And the other thing is, you guys have to speak in English. Okay, you throw these acronyms around, you throw these ratios around, you talk about passive house, and while we all in this room may know what that means, I can guarantee you that 85% of the people in this community have no idea what you mean when you talk about passive house. They may think solar and nothing else, but they have no idea. So if we're going to educate the community, we need to educate them in a language and in a way that people are going to understand, and that people are going to appreciate that, you know what, this is something that's actually going to be beneficial for the town, beneficial for you, it's going to be cost efficient, it comports with our sustainability goals, our climate change goals, and so I think that's a huge task, and I just think that we all need to be aware of that, and it's going to take a concerted effort out of the town manager's office, you know, the climate, you know, the energy committee, the clean action committee. I mean, everybody in town would really have to work on this to get this moving forward. So those are my practical concerns about this. That has nothing to say that I don't support the, you know, I don't want this to be interpreted that I am not supportive of the specialized code. I just think that we all need to appreciate the work it's going to take to implement it and to get it put into place here in the town. So,
of course, and I don't think I mentioned that I am planning to meet with the building commissioner, Henry, at some point to go over more of the complexities of the specialized code. And as Mike had mentioned, that we do have and Sue had mentioned, we do have a public information session for September 12th. So we are going to present a different set of slides. Like I mentioned, I just wanted to be very general to be respectful of everyone's time. Our public information session is going to go a lot more in detail and going to be a bit more of a walkthrough of what the code entails. And I think, and I believe there's an intake form for builders, developers, and members of the public to ask their questions prior to the meeting so that we can provide tailored answers beforehand.
Yeah, in building on that, the Mass Save program does provide training to building inspectors and to code enforcement officials. So as part of that, I know that my colleague Bill is setting something up with the town of Westford to help educate the building inspector and others in town to learn more.
That's all great, but at the end of the day, it's town meeting that has to adopt this, and it's the folks who come to town meeting that need to understand this.
Right.
Okay, so that's all great, but, and that's all needed. I'm not saying it's not, but let's not forget that it's the residents of the town of Westford that are going to adopt or not adopt this, and we can't lose focus of that, and we need to know that they are part of this educational process as well.
One of the
Can I just answer one of
Sure.
Andrew's questions? So, in working with Jeff and his team, we have started to begin to reach out to area building commissioners. With Chelmsford and Acton, I'm not sure of the other communities, they have adopted it, but it has not been implemented per se. So the data is a little bit skewed. So we're planning to present all of that data to you. It's just, it is a slow process, and so that is on our work plan for sure. Thanks. Of course.
Of the 45, that's really the problem, is that there's a lack of actual permitted data. So I'm not 100% sure.
Effective in 19, I believe.
Yeah, as of July.
As of this July.
Yeah, so, and I think there's at least a dozen that have been in effect since at least last January. So we should be able to get some information, but how many municipal projects, how many commercial projects, we don't know yet.
So my question actually is, what does this to the cost per square foot of construction? Because we've already learned we have a library that was scheduled for a conventional upgrade. The new state code ballooned that cost by $1 million or more. So there's upfront cost to this, which I know you'll make the argument that in the long run it pays for itself. I might question that given our state's power rates versus natural gas prices, but accepting the argument for the moment, you're still going to get a mortgage. We've already got people who can't afford a house. The town's going to put out a bond, and long run savings are nice, but you can do the override now. So are we looking at an increasing cost of 4%? 6%? I've seen anything from 2% to 8%, depending upon where you are in the country for increased costs, but that's just my reading. I was curious what research you may have done.
So we do have cost updates that are ongoing to be a bit more recent, but then they haven't been finalized yet. What DOER's analysis from a couple years ago at this point, which has been corroborated with some third-party data from the Home Builders Alliance and RMI, they have found that in general there is a -1% to +4% building increase cost to meet the latest stretch energy code, which is exclusive of what's going on of inflation and interest rates, because those will change over time. But just to meet the requirements of the code, we're seeing a neutral to a slightly modest cost increase, and a lot of that is obviously offset by the mass save incentives and with in certain cases with the Inflation Reduction Act.
Yeah, I think I was looking at an article from Denver that was maybe a year or two old that had that 2 to 6% range. So it's about the same range, but okay, that's good to know. John, your hand's back up again?
Oh, yeah. You said the specialized code is only for new construction.
Correct.
In your slides, you did address accessory dwelling units of over 1,000 square foot addition and things like that. And my question is, are there cases where this does impact existing homes if there's a significant alteration or addition to the home?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So not as part of the specialized code that you're looking to adopt, but as the stretch code that's already in place, yes, there are requirements that are on top of it for existing buildings. And so those requirements are in place for both accessory dwelling units and existing buildings that meet a certain threshold. So if you're over 1,000 square feet, I believe there's a requirement to do a HERS rating on it, which is that home energy rating system third-party certification program, looking at all the energy features of the home. If it's under 1,000 square feet, I believe, or I think it's 1,000 square feet or 100% of the existing conditioned floor area. It's if it's under that, you can follow the prescriptive requirements of the code. So there are requirements that are out there for existing buildings, but those are part of the stretch code, or those are part of the code you've already adopted. There's no additional requirements as part of this specialized code.
Thank you.
Chris, you were going to...
Yeah, so I think somebody made a mention that certain towns have adopted this but haven't implemented it yet. So what is the timeline if we adopted a town meeting? When do we have to have it implemented by?
That's actually up to you. DOER recommends that it be done either in January or July, because that's usually when other code changes take effect, and it's just practically easier for builders. And so we also recommend a timeline of 6 to 12 months after your town meeting vote. So this would mean July of 2025, or you could go January 2026. Technically, you could pick any date you wanted to, but that's what DOER would recommend. July of 25 or January of 26. And you'd still be eligible, if you met all of the other criteria, to apply for the Climate Leaders Program.
Yeah, and a big part of the reason for that delay a little bit is just to give the building community a little bit of time to be able to learn the code and know what else they have to do to comply with it.
I've got one more.
Promise only one more? As I want to call a halt here, okay?
We've had experience with grants in the past where we have to expend X amount of money to get the grant. The grant comes after. And in a situation where we're a little bit hurting for cash, or a little bit, budget's under stress, we don't have the leeway sometimes to put forward that money. So how would you characterize these grants that would be available to us if we adopt the code?
So we're still working out the kinks with our Climate Leaders grants. I expect our capital grants to follow our Green Communities timeline. So you'll get a quarter of the award up front, and then the rest is paid on a reimbursable basis.
Okay.
So the other 75% you'd have to be invoiced for your work, and then we would disperse the funds. But your first 25% you'll get up front. And I imagine it will be the same for Climate Leaders, but I can't confirm that.
Okay.
There's not a match right now to green communities, so I think that's what you might be getting at, is some grants we have to provide a match, like a 25% match or a 5% match. With these, we don't have
Sorry,
to, there's no match, correct.
No, I was thinking more of like the library, where we had to spend $1.8 million up front to put in ground heat pumps, geothermal heat pumps, and then we would get it back at project completion if we met. So we were footing a loan, for 2 years with town money, which we can't do, we legally can't even do. So that was I think where I was coming from is we paying incrementally as the bill comes in, we get reimbursed. That works. Being told to complete the project and then get paid, that doesn't really work. So.
Right, which is the case with the IRA tax credits.
Exactly, yes.
But our green communities, because we're a grant, we work differently. Like we still have to be responsible to the state taxpayers, or the state ratepayers rather. But it's usually 25% up front and then 75% on a reimbursable basis.
Okay, Chris, you promised one last one.
Yes. So, Andrew, I really loved your practical concerns, and one of which that you mentioned was the impact to staff. So, do you think we will be able to get some memo from staff about the possible impact to their workloads and whether or not they can take it on by the time this comes back to us in the next meeting?
I'm not sure if we'll be able to do that in that period of time because there's so many unknowns at this period of time. We can certainly reach out to those area communities and understand that, but we may not understand the full impact to staff by your next meeting in September. Anything you wanted to add to that?
I was going to say strong, unlikely chance of that. And a clarification, John, this simply passing the code, if town meeting were to adopt it, that does not entitle us to the climate leaders. We would have to meet the remaining criteria there in order to qualify for that next round of grants,
Well,
for that
we
next
have the
level.
code, and we adopt the policy.
There's a few other things we have to
There's
do
a
as
few
well.
other
I thought
pieces.
we'd already done the other three.
Not all of them, no.
Now, we've got to have the decarbonization roadmap, we've got to have the new vehicle policy. we've got to
Zero
have-
emission vehicle policy, a decarbonization roadmap for municipal operations, and a decarbonization commitment, which I assume you already have. But yeah, the municipal roadmap would also have to be done.
So I see our town energy brain trust out there. Any questions from them? No?
No.
Beth, you always have a question. Come on.
No?
It isn't a question, but I assume I can make a comment
Yes,
at
you
this
can,
point.
yes.
So I'm Beth Perkins, Patriot Lane, and a member of the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee, and I'm here with Tom Teller and Mike Berlinski, who's our chair. I don't know who else is online. We developed Westford's climate roadmap, and this is an important part of our roadmap. I'm remembering back to when we gave the first presentation. Many of you were here, but it was a few years ago. And we went over the climate roadmap and the fact that buildings was such a huge issue with both inefficiency, energy inefficiency, and greenhouse gas emissions. And I remember Jody, who was our town manager at the time, saying, well, you have to go over those, get onto those new buildings that are being developed. And I think that's what I think is the most important part of this specialized code, is that these new buildings that are going in are going to be here for 30 years. They could be here for 50 or more years. And this only relates to new buildings. I know it's been said several times tonight, but for most residents of our town, this really isn't going to have an impact on them. But for people who are building new houses, and in addition to building a new house or multifamily house, they decide, aside from all the incentives and all the data that says all electric is the efficiency of the future, saves money in the long run, they decide, I want a natural gas hookup. I want to do mixed fuel. If they go ahead and do that, what this code is saying for single-family houses is you need to pre-wire for the next guy. So when you sell your house and the new people move in, they don't have to tear the house apart. The house is pre-wired. And I've asked about estimates for that pre-wiring and got $2,000–3,000 at the most. Because as you know, most of you know, when you're building a new building, it's pretty easy to put in the correct wiring. And for multifamily houses, to meet these very efficient energy standards like passive house, you will get, there are many incentives for those buildings, and not from Massey, from our utilities, and the cost savings over the life of that house are enormous. And that's what we're talking about here. New buildings only, pre-wiring, and if you build a huge house, you know, I think 4,000 square feet, and you still say, I want to do mixed fuel, aside from everything that we just talked about, you need to put in some solar, which again, this is for the very, very large homes. So this is an important step for our roadmap, to get serious about new buildings and make sure they're as energy efficient as possible. We're working with Jeff and we're working with Mike to do publicity for the presentation that's going to be on September 12th. So we helped to develop a flyer. We're going to get the word out. And you know, we're willing to do what it takes to get information out to people. But again, I think it's going to be primarily of interest to developers. I don't think most people in town actually, they'll be affected by the good news, okay, that we're addressing our climate issue, but their homes aren't going to be affected. But
And that's an important message to get out. I think you're right.
right. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that insight. That is really valuable. One thing I want to do is just clarify, though, that the requirement to use solar is applicable even if it's under 4,000 square feet. Just the size of the solar array you put in is different.
So I think we're done.
So when is this coming back? Our second meeting in September?
12th?
So your meeting is September 10th, your next meeting. The forum is September 12th, so we will have as much information as we can in your packet in advance of the September 24th meeting.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Take care.
Old new business, so.
ARPA.
I'm sorry.
Number 6.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I know,
Yep.
sorry.
ARPA, so yeah, I guess review projects approved, which should be pretty quick. The real thing here is the new request, but if you want to cover for Dan, I think.
Yeah, I will cover for Dan. Yep, he provided me with a great summary. So our current ARPA balance is $606,524. At the last meeting, the board allocated $14,900 for the survey at 12 North Main and $50,000 for the sustainability support services for NIMCOG. So far, in fiscal '25, you've authorized $65,000 and a little above that. Tonight, we have before you 2 additional requests totaling $41,796. The first is to allocate $13,796 to fund an ATV to be used by the fire and police departments. We are expecting a grant to fund the remaining for a total of the purchase of the ATV at $18,896. And then the second request is associated with the October 2024 special town meeting expenses. We do anticipate this to be a large town meeting, similar to the size of the annual town meeting. We are looking to continue to wire up 2 additional buildings that you've already allocated ARPA funds for, but this is really for additional custodial services, additional police details, additional transportation for off-site parking, and additional tellers and whatnot. So you have a summary of all of those ancillary costs in your packet. It totals a little bit under $28,000, but just asking for a not to exceed of 28 in case there's any other unforeseen costs related to the special town meeting.
And any questions? Chris?
So if the issue with the ATV came up and we didn't have ARPA funding, how would we have addressed that?
We would try to go to capital for a town meeting or try to find another source, but at this point in time, reviewing this with the chief and Mr. Donnell and I, we felt that the ARPA request would be appropriate to ask your board with the matching grant funds to supplement the other.
Thank you.
Any other board questions, comments? Motion to
Move to approve.
both?
Both.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Old new business, request to appoint Nate McKinnon as the FinCom member to the Health Insurance Trust.
I'll move to appoint.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
And before there's a vote, just wanted to note, tomorrow we do have a health insurance trust meeting, so if for some reason Nate cannot get sworn in, would you accept Christina Green, who is currently the member, to sit and vote on that meeting?
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
And Nate can sit in on the meeting, he just can't.
Right, he couldn't vote. So he has been sitting on the meetings just to prepare, but wanted to just make that clarification.
It's a request to appoint Brian Knight to the Economic Development Committee for a term expiring June 30th, 2027.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you for your time, Brian.
He's passed your endurance test for.
He's still here.
Oh, is he still here? Oh, do you want to say hi? Okay. Well, thanks for coming.
Really?
Yeah, you're right. You passed the endurance test. Thank you, Jeff.
We should put those at the end.
Yeah. That's before adjournment next time, yeah. To review the progress of board and committee appointment policy, which Jeff's already alluded to, so I think I know it's going to Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you may recall, we first began discussing the board and committee appointment process at your meeting of July 16th. We noted several opportunities to potentially improve the process and increase transparency. So the memo in your packet is sort of a test case. We use the vacant alternate EDC member-at-large position to sort of vet this. And so we put together a memo for your consideration, and we're really just looking to get some feedback from you. We thought it might be a good thing if we just provide, a brief committee summary, note any vacancies, provide an accounting of all the citizen activity forms, or CAFs, for anyone who expressed interest in the past 2 years. So we did suggest that as a starting point for a time frame at our last time we talked about this. And then we went through all of those CAFs, and there were quite a few CAFs submitted over the last 2 years. We flagged all the ones for EDC, and through those we noted that the majority of them, a lot of them had already been appointed to the EDC over the last 2 years. Some folks had been appointed to other boards or committees, but not the EDC. Other folks, once they learned more information about how the committee met or their meeting schedule, they were unable to attend due to those conflicts. And so when you factor all of those things in, you were left with, in this most recent case, of just one CAF over the last 2 years for the one available position. So hopefully that made it easier for you folks. We also think it's good practice to include the committee's charge in case that needs any updating. If the committee has any recommendations to offer for the select board's consideration, and then the current membership of the committee. So we're just trying to get a few simple questions answered from you tonight. So is the memo helpful? Is it too much? Is it too little? Is 2 years the right time frame from doing a look back to keep the CAFs current? We think it makes absolute sense to just put all of the unaccounted for CAFs in your packet. No matter if the committee offers a recommendation, just take anyone who put their name in the hat the last 2 years, unless they're somehow crossed off the list, just put it in your packet for consideration. And then another policy question here is, to what degree should service on another board or committee affect a candidate's chance for appointment? And that might well vary depending on the board or the nature of the charge. So that's not a hard and fast answer, but we just want you to think about that, because of the folks who did get appointed to another board or committee, I think half of them said, I already got on another board, and others, by the way, I think the Economic Development Committee, they do a fantastic job. I think they have a good model going, and they're very swift consistently, and that's not always easy to do for volunteers. So I just want to give them some credit there. But we do want some guidance, because there are some that did not say we don't want to be a part of it, but they just were unresponsive when they finished up service on that other board or committee, and maybe that committee was discharged. It was still within, say, the 2-year window, and they just didn't connect. They didn't respond when prompted again. So I think most committees feel you shouldn't have to chase for the volunteers. If you reach out and they don't get back to you over a period of time, then, move on. So we're just looking for some guidance on should that immediately disqualify, or do you still want to have those candidates if they've already been appointed to other boards? So, and that's it.
So first of all, thank you. I mean, clearly you've done a tremendous amount of work in this and put a tremendous amount of thought into it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated. I'll echo what Megan said at the beginning during our open forum. I thought this was great. I thought it was really helpful. It was great to see a synopsis of sort of, for this committee, not only who was going to be appointed and who would apply, but also the fact that, 6 have been appointed, just seeing the history I thought was really interesting. I think, personally, I think a 2-year look back is the right amount of time.
Okay.
I don't think that simply because you're on another board or committee should in and of itself affect whether you're considered for another board. Could it be a factor? Yes, but I don't think it should be a deciding factor, and I certainly don't think it should just be a disqualifying factor that because you're on Committee A that you can't apply for and be on Committee B. Because, well, frankly, 2 things. One, Committee A could have been disbanded and, we just didn't know. But secondly, maybe the person was really interested in Committee B, but, decided he or she would go on Committee A first just to become part of, a committee in the town. And if they're going to be considered for Committee B, and they might decide, well, now I don't want to be on Committee A because I'm on Committee B and I'd rather make my commitment there. I think we need to give people those choices,
Right.
so.
So maybe we could modify, like just noting, include them, but note if they are serving on another board.
Yeah, I think it's information we should have, but I just,
How did you make that joke?
Well,
I don't think it's a disqualifying factor in and of itself.
And sometimes, if you're on pedestrian safety, you're actually a better candidate for Healthy Westford, right? So sometimes the committees are reinforcing in terms of bringing in, ideas that cross-pollinate.
Okay,
So
that's helpful.
Chris?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. This is Andrea said, I think this is excellent. Probably my number one thing I would love to change about this process is our naming of it being a citizen activity forum. I recently realized that you don't have to be a citizen to be on virtually all of our boards with the exception of FinCom. So I would think that we might be more embracing if we said, say, resident activity forum and call it RAF, for example, just in case, there are somebody out there who's not necessarily a citizen but wants to be involved on a board or committee. So that would be my first recommendation.
What's that?
You had a thought on that, was it?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think Finance Committee is the only committee that requires you, and select, obviously our elected boards require you to be a citizen.
That's a great
But
suggestion.
and I think you had also suggested that we change our web page where it says Citizen Activity Forum to be a volunteer page or a resident involvement
It's like
page.
volunteer.
Yep.
So if Redmond's make a volunteer.
Activity forum. Sure.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. I like the idea of the current membership. It would be helpful for me if you maybe added the expiration date of the membership as a separate column, or a starting date. As far as the 2-year versus a shorter or longer duration, is it fairly like just an automated query that you're running? And so if you look at 2 years versus 6 months, is it an appreciably different amount of work?
So I enlisted the help of, at the time, IT department. They just ran a search based on the date, and they gave me every CAF. I don't know if they have a way to filter by committee, but, there were only so many for EDC. A number of them, again, folks, and this is just attacking one of the suggestions that we brought up at the last meeting, the other related to CAFs, which is another whole other process, more involved, but for right now, we thought it was more important, and since we had an example, start with your appointment process, because that could immediately bring about, quick change. So, we're happy to, it didn't take that long to go through. We just want to be mindful, like, if we're gonna do this process for every single, appointment for every board and committee, we just want to see, we don't want to make work, yet we want to be transparent, so we might have to play test this a few times and see if there's a easier, simpler way to filter those things, so it takes up less collecting time for everyone.
And that rolls into my next question or point is just which committees would we be doing this for, right? So if it came to pedestrian safety, would we be going through this process? If it was Park and Rec, right, who, Kristen's the appointing authority, would we be going through this process?
So, right now you don't have a policy. We're trying to get you to a policy, and this is an example to get you to that policy. In your policy, you could say, we strongly recommend that the town manager or other appointing authority use the same policy. So that could be a suggestion. Or you could say they don't need to do that, but I think following a similar policy for another appointing authority, and it's basically myself and the moderator, I believe, are the other appointing authorities. So that's
For
where
the
it would
most
affect.
part, I would say the majority of the committees, we are the appointing authority. FinCom is the moderator. You're Park and Rec. What other ones?
I think I probably have 12 or
You do? That-
14.
okay.
There's
Okay.
quite a bit. And then I think the moderator also has the Personnel Advisory Committee. So the moderator has 2 or 3.
Okay.
I think I have about 12 to
Right.
14.
But between the
and you
three
have-
parties, we can,
Right.
this would be, we could make this work. Okay, great. Thanks.
Well, I guess the question, right now, basically, the committee, it's just a party meets with the committee recommends that an individual to us. We aren't, as a board, looking through 12 applications and trying to second guess the will of a committee. So I guess at some point this process, I want the documentation, want to know, who's applied and and who, wasn't picked, I think we can ask questions as to, perhaps, the why, but I don't want to sort of, bypass the entire will of a committee in terms of picking its own members.
Well, if I may maybe overstep a little, respectfully suggest the authority is yours to appoint, right? And I think you're well served by taking whatever advice and recommendations those committees might bring you. But who knows, for any board or committee, what may come up down the road. You may find out the role of a particular committee. Maybe maybe part of their task is to evaluate, a particular project in a certain part of town, and maybe you feel it's important to have representative from, say, Graniteville, or you want to have representation from an underserved part of the community. You never know what you might come up against, and so, I think a lot of the times you weigh the committee deals with their own work all the time, and they're probably in the best position to give you information about, this is the makeup of our committee, this is a niche or a skill set that maybe we don't have yet, or a perspective that we don't have. We would appreciate if this individual gets appointed, but at the same time, you may have different policy issues that you may decide for right then and there are more important than what that committee may have to say. That's up to your discretion, because you are the appointing authority, but I would try to get that input from the committee every time they're willing to provide it.
Oh, I agree. I think you have to have the committee's recommendation as part of this memo.
Yeah.
Right, so.
And the good news is, if you're the appointing authority to that committee, you can set policy saying that, we want you to provide these recommendations, so, because they're a committee that you appoint, so.
We don't get recommendations from every committee, or we don't
No,
get,
we don't.
back and forth, so we would like to strengthen that.
Okay, so that would be part of the new policy.
Yep.
So far, it sounds like good progress, a few tweaks. We don't know what it might mean if we did it for every board or committee, and that's part of the homework.
This is a test case.
And then the other.
This is sort of the example of an implementation, but the actual policy part, the written policy, that needs to come next, I guess, right? So that's what we would see, and, okay.
Yes.
And as far as the VAF or volunteer activity form or resident activity, what do we want to call it?
My father was in the RAF, so I just wanted to put the RAF.
That's what I was thinking. So.
I think volunteer activity.
So we want to say VAF. Do we need a motion, or is that good enough for us to?
I think we have consensus that we'll work with IT and our other staff to change the website and change the form name, and then get the word out for people who may be confused by VAF versus CAF.
And it won't eliminate them from the 2-year.
Right, exactly. It's not changing the process, or they're
Everybody's still in
Exactly.
in the queue, so to speak.
yes, yeah.
Of alias, VAF, alias, CF, just like on emails.
Formerly
Okay.
known as FKA.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to work on that and bring back a draft policy, and perhaps if you have another board appointment, we'll test this again with a similar type of memo moving forward.
So I know I have 2 people for Park and Rec in the pipeline. Do you want anything now for that, or do you want to just do what we've normally done?
No, I think if we can test it with this type of memo and
Okay.
process for Park and Rec, I think that would be great. So that's my appointment, and I'm happy to go through that with you.
So we have a meeting on the 9th. We have 2 new members coming.
Okay.
We'll maybe take a vote at that point. So,
Okay, next up, it's that time of the 3 years again. Designate board members to participate in the upcoming negotiations with our unions. So we need to have volunteers for police superiors, WPWA, CWA, and OPIEU.
those last 3 are.
So WPWA is our DPW union, so highway, parks, and grounds. CWA is really our clerical union, as well as water workers and dispatchers, and OPEIU is our middle management union.
And I've been doing highway for, I don't know how many years now, so I'd be happy to do it again.
Why don't you just continue?
I did the police and superiors last time.
You did both? I thought I did superiors last time. I did,
think
maybe it was
so.
the time before. I
Yeah,
can't remember.
this was 2 years ago. We were a little bit behind.
Okay, I mean, I'm not arguing with you, I just,
22.
yeah, I'm not arguing with you, I just, I know I've done Superior's
I
twice.
remember, no.
No, that's fine, you can have it. I'm not arguing.
Well, Tom's not here, so we can give it to
Negotiators.
Tom. I can do the DPW, the WPWA.
I think Scott
That's,
just said
I
that.
saw do that.
Oh, you said you wanted to continue, I'm sorry, I thought you meant you wanted to
No,
give it
no,
up
no,
because
I-
you've been doing it for so long.
No. I know the names, I gotta, yeah.
I'm doing fire right now.
Fire.
Um,
So who has
So we
been?
have
who has
Tom
done-
and Chris.
Who has done these other ones in the past? Nobody, or?
Which other one?
CWA and OPIU.
Who did CWA and OPIEU? I don't think we had anybody do it the last time.
I mean, I can do those two. Sure.
Well, you can win the Tom if you want.
Yeah, give one to Tom.
Okay.
So which one do you not want? We'll give it to him.
I have no idea. I've never done either, so don't know. I'll take the CWA since it's shorter.
What kind of time are you looking for on this?
So Andrea was appointed for the fire union this time last year. We have yet to set a ground rule, well, we have a ground rules meeting for September 12th, I believe. It's been pushed and pushed. I believe that I would like to have these wrapped up very close to July 1st of 2025, but with our budget situation, with how the unions may be operating, it may be later. So really, this is just to set the stage and the groundwork. If the board membership changes or something else changes, we can always discuss who would be that. But I think we would probably be starting discussions in the March timeline after town meeting.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering about, because last year, I think we were still negotiating in September or August in '22 for the
Okay.
current contract
Yeah.
that goes through FY '25.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good.
Are these typically during business hours, in person?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Usually, I make them do it in the morning for me, just.
Okay.
Yeah, highway issues around like noonish times, with the late morning, we tend to do it, but, yeah, it's just whatever. It's usually a function of, because usually labor has an attorney, so it's also what happens with his or her schedules to be here.
We only have one or two unions to worry about. She's got to worry about all of them. I mean, that's a big.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
a lot
you
of
had-
them are coming due this next year, right?
All of these are coming due, so it was all batched.
All of these are there.
Right.
They're
Yeah,
all-
fire is the only
Fire's
one
the
that's
only-
a year ahead right now. So they're not spread out.
May not be the time or the place, but, we heard from Dennis, and we've heard from Dennis many, many times about the way that the union contracts sort of all come together at the same time.
So he was talking about service contracts, I believe, related to
Was it-
3-year service contracts.
Union I thought it
No.
was labor, okay.
So labor is generally a 3-year contract.
Right, it wasn't the length of the contract, it was the fact that, at least my interpretation of what he was saying was that they tend to all occur roughly at the same time. Right? And I think he was suggesting that if you staggered them, there was some sort of benefit to doing that. So like, instead of having these, all come up at once, we would have, say, the police 1 year, and then the next group the next year.
We had that many, many years ago where they were staggered, and then actually, there was a concerted effort
To bring it back.
to bring them back all together, I don't know how you feel about that, I mean, you may not like that.
I won't say that in public how I feel about this. We can talk offline.
But, I mean, maybe, I'm certainly willing to revisit it again, but, at that point in time, there were issues, and people thought that it was better to have them all done at the same time.
I can see, some pros and cons of both
Yeah,
approaches.
yeah.
I mean, I think the reason why he was bringing up is he feels there's some sort of cost savings associated with it, but I don't know if there's any data to prove that out.
Well, no, I think the issue is that when you do them all at once, if you have an inflationary environment, you get all the labor costs increasing in the same year.
And that's why
If
they are.
if they were staggered, you would have the increases coming through sequentially. But
And you're always concerned about if they're staggered, that whoever went first wants to reopen
Yes.
a year or two later, so.
Yes, right.
We won't
Okay.
give away all our trade secrets in the public meeting.
Board reports updates? Okay. Town manager's report.
Great, thank you. So we have a request to accept a donation of funds in the amount of $40.44 from an Eagle Scout candidate, Nicholas Lakukuta, as requested by the Conservation Resource Planner. We have a request to accept the Mass DOT Rail and Transit Division Helping Hands mini grant allocation in the amount of $790.22 as requested by the Council on Aging. So those are two donation or grant acceptances.
Catherine, one question. So if we were to say accept the donation of the 4844 from the Eagle Scout, does that go into the conservation or does it go to general fund?
No, I believe it goes into the conservation
Okay, good. I'd like to make sure it goes
Yes,
where, yeah.
yes. We have a request to approve a Mass Department of Energy Resources grant for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant application. We have a request to approve the Maya Risk Management Grant application. And we have a request to approve composting and food waste reduction grant application. So I'll pause there if there's any questions on those grants.
Can I just say thank you to Mike, because it looks like you did all those grant applications and we're receiving them, so thank you very much.
I had a lot of help, so.
Well, you and your
Everybody
team,
who
we,
helped.
thank you, we appreciate it. It's great to get these grants.
Well, we don't have them yet. We have to apply. I will say on the Maya one, we will have a little bit of a change with that one. We've been pestering Maya a little bit about some freebies, and they've actually just let us know this afternoon. They're giving us a bunch of building monitoring systems for freeze and
Great.
cold detection. So we'll find something else to apply for, but we'll apply for the full amount.
Well, great, again, but thank you for, the hard work that goes into writing and applying for these grants.
Happy to do.
Great, and then the last one under that is fiscal 25 Lowell Regional Transit Authority contract and grant funding, which is a standard year-over-year application. I don't know if you want to take a vote on that and then move to purchase orders and contracts, or take it all at one time.
Yeah, I'll do it all at once, I think. I'm not hearing any contention.
Sure, so the last one, the purchase orders is for Lexipol for policy manual in the amount of $10,884.26 as requested by the fire department. This is, I don't think it's every year, but it's on a reoccurring basis. And then a contract with Ty and Bond for professional engineering services associated with the PFAS water treatment plants for final design and bidding in the amount of $1.15 million as requested by the water department. Those two projects did receive planning board approval last week.
I just have one question about the Ty and Bond. They have a timeline that looks really aggressive to me. Are they really going to make that timeline?
I believe they are, and I think it's based upon the DEP requirements as well for that. So we have every implication that they are going to make that timeline, but if we go off schedule, I'll be sure to.
Okay, I mean, I just looked at that and thought, wow, that's a really tight timeline. So.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve.
Actually, just a quick question,
Yep.
sorry. On that contract, does that project go out to bid, or?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so did we receive other responses for that? Or
So we have not gone out to bid yet. So this contract is for Ty and Bond to do the final design of the water treatment plant, put it out to bid, and that includes putting together the bid documents. So we have not gone out to bid yet.
So the plan is 30 million, so.
Yeah, I know, but even this effort itself, does that go out? I mean, it's kind of weird to go out
Sure.
to bid to get
So
somebody to prepare documents.
So
about
Ty and
it.
Bond has been the design engineer from the beginning to the end, so it's traditional that the design engineer stays from the beginning to the end unless there's some sort of issue with that design engineer, which we have not seen such an issue on this project.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'll move to approve.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. It's motion to waive reading of the correspondence.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. And
I will move to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor? Aye.